The doctor felt hope in his hearts, for the first time since his 8th incarnation, even though Rosa's rejection of his offer to travel with him risked crushing them into his ribcage. The TARDIS doors creaked closed and the doctor sighed. All was silent, as if even the TARDIS was holding her breath. And then the doctor decided. No. No debating, no equivocation. He wasn't going to let that flicker of hope die. He turned to the console, and with a fierce grin said, "Well, show me the cosmos. I'm the doctor after all. The doctor wanders. Let's wander." And so he did. Extinction Day. Written by Daniel Worsley. Under a night sky illuminated by the sapphire ball of a sister planet, a battered wooden blue box materialized with a wheezing groan. Underneath the words, "Police Public Call Box," a pair of doors opened with a creak. A tall man dressed in a bright blue jumper, under a battered leather coat, looked up at the sky and muttered, "Well, there's a familiar view." The security team trampled through the scrubland, a routine patrol that was about to have a less than routine encounter. The leader of the team was a grizzled planeswalker, a veteran of nearly 100 summers, and despite being there for nearly 2 entire cycles, still wasn't used to all the plant life. Felloc mentally shrugged. He probably never would be, not with the cataclysm so close. His offsider, a jittery caves dweller named Yella, was taking point, as they were best suited for the nighttime conditions. "An ape!" Yella hooted worriedly, his third eye emitting waves of psychic force at his victim. Felloc's eyes, in his case only 2, might not have been as dark adapted as Yella's, but he could see well enough that Yella's ape was nothing of the sort. He was too tall for a start, and too hairless. "Hold, lad," Felloc commanded, and when Yella didn't comply, he cuffed him around the head. It might have been a violation of community orders, but secretly Felloc enjoyed it, just a little too much. Once Yella stopped his assault, Felloc knelt over the crumpled body of the ape. It was the doctor. The doctor came abruptly to consciousness. In the moments before he opened his eyes, he sought answers to 3 questions. Where am I? Who am I? And who are you? Unfortunately, he could only answer one of those, and so resorted to the tried, trusted approach of asking out loud, "Where am I?" A young green-scaled woman was standing over him, looking down at his recumbent form curiously, and she jumped when he suddenly spoke. "Hello there," the doctor gifted her with a rare, genuine smile. "I'm the doctor. Who are you?" "She doesn't need to answer you, Mondasian," a new voice said. It was commanding and cold, and if the doctor was being honest, all too familiar. "Oh, the Bliss Squad's arrived. What'll be first? We have ways of making you talk, or straight to attaching electrodes to parts of my body, because really, I'll talk to anyone." The doctor got up slowly, dusted himself down, and conducted a quick assessment of the contents of his pockets. Toothbrush, yes. Psychic paper, yes. Jelly babies? Yes, although he had no idea how they kept appearing in his pockets. Sonic screwdriver? No. So, the Bliss Squad weren't idiots. Part of the doctor relished the idea of outwitting them, but he had his suspicions that leaving sooner rather than later was of the essence. Finally, he turned to regard them. He offered them a smile, not a genuine one this time, and said, "Hello, I'm the doctor." He still relished the sound of his voice, saying that after so long of denying it, but he felt it was going to be the only bit of enjoyment he was going to have this evening. He looked at the trio of Silurians, a green-scaled one like his young guard, a planeswalker if he remembered correctly, and a pair of the brown-scaled, 3-eyed caves dwellers. It was another piece of evidence suggesting that once again, despite weeks of success in avoiding trouble, the TARDIS had dropped him into the middle of history as it happened. "A science cast?" the obvious leader of the Silurians present asked, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, I've dabbled here and there, bits and bobs." He was baiting his captors, testing how far they were prepared to let him go before stopping him. His captor scowled, which was a good sign as far as the doctor was concerned. "Why are you here?" she asked. Still questioning, So she either hadn't made up her mind or was waiting to play a trump card. Holiday? Honesty and infuriation in one simple package. The doctor mentally patted himself on the back. He was met with a short bark of a laugh. If you are genuine Mondasian, then you picked a terrible place for one. Another tick in the I know what's coming column, the doctor thought. At least they weren't automatically assuming some criminal conspiracy on his part. And I'm not Mondasian, he added, as an afterthought. You're certainly not one of us, she said imperiously. She then waved at one of the cave's dwellers, who held up a scanning device. The doctor's body tingled pleasantly as he was scanned, and he couldn't resist laughing at the sensation. He's not Mondasian, Commander, he warbled. What are you? She asked, eyeing him warily. A wave of sadness washed over the doctor, consuming the small amount of bon vivancy he was experiencing. The truth still hurt. A gnawing agony of loneliness that the doctor was studiously trying to avoid facing. I'm a Time Lord, he said, his voice far away and long ago. Never heard of them, although the title seems to be rather overly melodramatic. There's not a lot of us about. Not anymore, the doctor said in a small, pain-filled voice. His captor took note of his mood and, either out of compassion or in the knowledge she'd get no more answers, such as they were, she left him in peace. It took the doctor a long time to realize that he was alone. With visible effort he shook off his funk. He scanned his cell and dug around in his pockets. Producing a rumpled paper bag, the doctor barked a short laugh when he saw that, somehow, instead of jelly babies, it was now full of mint leaves. One of these days, the doctor said conversationally as he popped a mint leaf into his mouth, I'm going to work out where you come from and how you get in my pockets. But the everyday mysteries of his life took second place to escaping from a cell on a world which, he was almost certain, was set to face disaster. The doctor's captors regarded the footage of him with cool but curious eyes. At her shoulder stood one of the cave's dwellers, Selek, who acted as chief scientist of their mixed-race facility. Selek, who had the unenviable duty of creating the great arcs capable of whisking their peoples away from the looming rogue planet, duplicating the technology that the people on their neighbouring world of Mondas had already perfected. In any other age, his achievements, up to this date, would have made him a legend, but the critical failure to get the arcs into space had, instead, rendered him a pariah. Could he hold the secret? She asked Selek. Logically, he said in the sing-song voice of all caves dwellers that worked so well in the depths they favoured but made conversation difficult for most planeswalkers. Logically, if it came here, it must have a ship. The patrol that found it also found a... She hesitated, as she struggled to not sound incredulous. A box, made of wood. Could that be its ship? Perhaps. We know the Mondasians use metal for their ships, while we, on the whole, use rock. Other species might use any number of other materials. Couldn't we simply ask it? Not until we've looked inside that box. I want to negotiate from a position of strength. Vastra, Selek scolded. We need to work together. All the peoples of this world and of those beyond too, if we want to survive. Talk to him, please. Or let me talk to him. It, Vastra corrected. We don't know its gender or even if it has one. Nor, she added venomously, if it is worthy of being considered on par with us. Those old prejudices die hard, don't they, Vastra? Selek said. Aren't you just a bit curious about him? I seem to remember you were always questioning things back in the old days. Curiosity is the purview of the scientist, she said, almost as if quoting something verbatim. Caution is my responsibility now. She couldn't meet Selek's eyes as she said it. What happened to the infamous Vastra? The woman who walked to the sea, the woman who questioned the triad itself, the woman who looked to the stars. Vastra didn't answer for the longest of times, and then she said, quietly, she grew up. Hours later, the door to the doctor's cell opened and Vastra stood in the doorway. "Feeding time already? I'll have the soup du jour, and seeing as grapes haven't evolved yet, it'll be ginger pop to drink." The doctor smiled in such a way his ears wiggled. Vastra regarded him levelly and said, "I don't think you're as stupid as you want us to believe." "Well, it's been said before that no one is as stupid as I appear." The doctor relished trading barbs with his captors. It was a tried, trusted and true method of getting interesting results. Today was no different. It seemed that his apparently smug reply struck home, and Vastra lost every vestige of self-control, and she burst forward and grabbed the doctor, hissing, "My people are facing death, and some alien," she all but spat out the word, "comes here and jokes and mocks. Either help us or leave. No one here will stop you. No one has the time to." She pushed the doctor away and turned her back on him, but not before the doctor caught sight of the desperation in her eyes and heard the fear in her voice. He felt the weight of history on his shoulders, the looming pressure of a fixed point in time pressing on his soul. He knew he should leave, but he also knew what it was to face extinction. "No more," he said quietly. "What?" Vastra asked, turning to face the doctor again. "I'm not going to run away. It's not my nature. I'll help you however I can." "I don't trust you," Vastra said. "That's okay. Friendships have been built on less. One of my best friends tried to kill me when we first met." "No." As if a switch was thrown, the doctor went from flippant to deadly serious. "What's your problem?" The doctor was like a dervish, all but skipping from console to scientist and back again, asking questions of everyone he passed. He was like a sponge absorbing information, and then, as if a switch had been flicked, he stopped. He cocked his head to one side and asked, "Where did the moon come from?" "Moon? What's a moon?" Selek asked in reply. The doctor mentally slapped himself. "The rogue planet," he added. "No idea. We detected it one day, and it's been all hands to pump since. Gotcha. And the neighbors haven't been any help?" Vastra hesitated, and the doctor read a lot into her silence. "Have kept themselves to themselves. They are working as hard as we are to save their own people, but they're not communicating." "Nah, they wouldn't," the doctor muttered. Any further rumination was interrupted by a cry from one of the technical staff. "Chief Scientist, look!" The doctor had never heard a sea devil shout, and it wasn't a pleasant sound, like a stabbed man's final rattle. But seeing what had alarmed the technician froze even the doctor's hearts. The planet Mondas, nearest neighbor to the Earth, was moving away. Slowly at first, but glacially faster. The doctor felt his stomach flip. History was happening, and extinction was sure to follow. The doctor once told Rose that he could feel the Earth move. At the time he was being slightly melodramatic, but right now it was literally true. He could feel the subtle vibrations of the Earth expressing its outrage at the loss of its twin. It was faint at the moment, but the further away from Earth that Mondas moved, the greater the outrage and the greater the damage Earth would suffer. The doctor, figuratively speaking, could feel history holding its breath. He stood in the middle of the chaos of a world screaming its pain, as the once still silent point in a room filled with movement, panic, and hopelessness. Words spoken by another man echoed in his ears. No more. He had seen one world burn, but today he was the doctor. Never give up. Never give in. He couldn't remember who had said that to him, but as mottos went, it summed up the situation now. So he said it out loud. He said it again, louder and more forcefully when no one seemed to have heard him. Don't you worry, you lot. The smartest people on the planet in this room. We'll have it sorted before tea. The doctor had injected such a sense of certainty and optimism into his voice that some of the panic in the room faded. Just an iota. The panic returned with a scowl as Vastra stalked towards him, her hands resting on the weapon at her side. I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation, alien, Vastra hissed. The doctor looked at her for a moment, as if surprised by her comment, and then a bright smile spread across his face. He was genuine and warm, and for the first time in decades, Vastra felt a small spark of hope. She quashed it. There was no hope, and no insane alien was going to produce a surprise victory. "Oh, you're dead clever, you are," the doctor enthused. He turned and raced around the room, talking to various scientists and engineers and offering comments and giving orders as if born to do it. "Gravity?" He nodded. "Yes, you've said so already. The lack of which is what's going to kill my people. Nah, it's what's going to save your people. All you need is enough of it, the right amount of it, in the right spots." He gestured towards the main screen, showing Mondas's slowly accelerating departure. Soon enough, Mondas'll move too far away to keep Earth stabilized. But he leaned over a console and started tapping in commands. "If we're quick, we can replace the lost gravity field, at least for a time." On the screen, Vastra saw the last great hope of her people, the grounded ships that they once dreamt would take them away from their doomed homeworld. "They have artificial gravity. Not the same as a planet ape." She had an inkling of his plan, but she refused to leave the safety of her people to a potentially insane alien. "Ooh, jump, Vastra," the doctor commanded. Initially, she thought he was uttering some arcane insult, but his body language suggested she should actually jump. "No," was all she could say, so he jumped instead. "If gravity was so strong, I couldn't do that. Basic physics." "Of course," Selleck exclaimed, slapping a clawed hand to his forehead. "A weak force close by can overwhelm a strong force at a distance." "Exactly," the doctor enthused. He bounded to a console and started manipulating the controls. "If we place the ships at just the right points, their artificial gravity will balance the loss of the gravity from Mondas." There was silence as the gathered scientists absorbed the doctor's plan. The doctor's hearts began to sink as the initial rush of adrenaline faded and the sheer weight of the situation began to truly hit home. Here he was, at a fixed point in history, and he could feel history moving around him. That was new. That was odd. Previously he could feel the inevitability of history, but now there was a terrifying void where that inevitable certainty used to reside. Could the war have damaged time so much that even the fixed points had become flexible? It was a sobering thought. No Time Lords to come in and anchor history. There was only him. A madman in a box who ran away from his responsibilities until there was nowhere left to run. "Oh, I've missed this," the doctor said, an intense gleam in his eyes. Vastra was aghast. "You missed the end of the world?" Her voice dripped with venom. He smiled dangerously and waved his hands in the air. "Nah. The fact that this is a problem we can science the hell out of. We can save the day by being terribly clever." Another dangerous smile that almost distracted from the pain in his eyes. "You can survive without killing. All you need is to be really, really smart." Vastra regarded him coldly. She doubted that this insane alien could do as he promised, and said so. His face fell. "Some cheery help you are?" "Not," a little voice whispered in his mind, like Rose Tyler would have been. "I am not here to be cheery. I am here to protect my people." Vastra sounded almost offended, something the doctor didn't miss. "And I'm here helping. I've got a lot of experience saving worlds." He hoped he sounded proud saying that, rather than smug. "And I can help you save yours. I have a little hope." Vastra looked at the doctor, and the doctor looked at Vastra. A silent, stationary tableau in a sea of motion and sound. "Who are you, Doctor?" Vastra asked. "No one ever asks, 'How are you, Doctor?'" The doctor deflected. Vastra raised an eyebrow cynically. "And how are you?" "Fine, thanks," the doctor replied with a cheery and utterly false smile. The smile disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. "I'll answer if you do." Vastra thought about it and nodded. "I'm a traveler in time and space. Came here because..." He took a deep breath. "Because there was a war. A war so massive and terrible it burnt empires throughout time and space. I came here because I ended that war and I don't know what to do next. I'm terrified that I don't know how to not be at war." He was honest, raw, and emotional. Vastra couldn't imagine anything that could break a man as full of life as the doctor so obviously was, and, for the first time, she felt genuine sympathy for him. That's why you're helping us? To prove I can save a world rather than destroy it? Yeah, scary, isn't it? A one-man weapon of mass destruction decides to build and has no idea if he has it in him anymore. Any more? Vastra asked, unable to resist the lure of her curiosity. The doctor seemed glad to be guided away from his dark thoughts. Yeah, he said, with forced brightness. Once upon a time I was renowned for my quick wits and clever... He lost his train of thought. Clogginess? He added vaguely. Vastra felt a twang of pity. Here was someone trying to help her people when by all rights he should be running in the opposite direction. But underneath it all, underneath the jokes and the smiles and the quick wits, was a sad, broken man. The doctor sat perched on a disused computer console, looking like a crestfallen gargoyle. He watched as people, smart, desperate, and suddenly hope-filled people, rushed around, trying to save their world. The first of the Silurian arcs were being launched within the hour. He was sure he could feel history starting to cement into a familiar pattern, but he wasn't sure. If he was sure, he'd have left by now. Instead, he was left twiddling his thumbs while others worked. Every so often, one of the scientists would bring him calculations to double-check or ask his advice on some arcane aspect of rocketry or gravity control that they'd never have encountered otherwise. But all told, he was feeling useless. He wasn't familiar enough with the computers or the technology in order to properly help out. Vastra approached him, minutes before the first launch. She was holding a cup full of steaming liquid. You asked for tea, she said, handing over the mug. The doctor sniffed it and smiled. Thanks. It was the quietest she'd ever seen him, but also the most honest. They've got everything under control here, don't they? They don't need me, he said eventually, looking deep into the swirling liquid of his drink. Vastra watched him for a moment, and then turned to watch the scientists. No, she said eventually. Did they ever? The doctor said, still peering into his drink. Vastra looked sharply at him. Yes. Without your unique insight, we'd have been lost. You saved the day because you remained calm. She paused, waiting for the doctor to look up. You built something here, alluding to the doctor's previous comments. A sad smile was her answer, a look as if he'd made a decision crossing his face. Well, thanks for the tea. I'll be off then. The doctor jumped to his feet and all but ran out of the room, Vastra following closely at his heels. The doctor stood at the doors of the TARDIS and turned to look at Vastra. History wasn't just happening around him, he thought. It was repeating. He'd offered Vastra a trip in the TARDIS, and she declined to ride his spaceship, which he was almost certain was an intentional double entendre. Well, it's also a time machine, he added lamely. Vastra looked tempted. Come with me. We can be there the moment your people wake up. Have the toast and crumpets all hot and buttery. His metaphor was lost on Vastra. She was seriously tempted to accept his offer, but she eventually shook her head. No. I have duties. Why would they listen to me if I hadn't shared their burden? Always thinking, the doctor nodded. Taking responsibility. Good. Vastra felt condescended to and responded more harshly than she meant to. A lecture on responsibility from the ape? She almost called him an ape, which was far ruder than she meant to be, and caught herself in time. Time Lord who runs away the first chance he gets. What do you mean? The doctor looked at her, his eyes hard. Vastra realized her mistake, but never the one to back down. She continued. The first chance you get to leave, you do. And here you are, asking me to run away with you. It felt like an age before he replied. You're right. Bad things happen when I take responsibility. Bad things happen all the time. My people would be dead if you didn't do what you did. The doctor didn't meet Vastra's eye. He looked old and tired and lost. My people are dead because I did, he said eventually. Vastra finally saw past the bluster, the devil-may-care attitude and the impish humour, to the person inside. He was afraid, lost and broken and alone. She was sorely tempted to accept his offer, but her entire civilization needed her more than one man. "You're the brave Triceratops," she said eventually, trying to inspire him to look up from his demons. "What?" he said with a confused look. "Sorry, it's a hatchling story about a Triceratops who's always afraid until one of his friends is hurt, and then he's brave enough to save his friend. You need someone to be brave for." She placed her hand on his arm and said, "Don't be alone, Doctor," and departed to face the future he had given them. The Doctor stood facing the TARDIS doors for a long time, staring at the chipped and worn paint. He rested his head against the doors and sighed. Him and his battered old time machine. Slowly, it dawned on him. He had never told Rose it was a time machine. A mischievous grin crossed his face. He turned to see the shape of Vastra in the distance and offered her back a wave goodbye. With the beginnings of a spring in his step, he opened the doors and disappeared inside. The TARDIS took off with an oddly optimistic wheezing, groaning sound. The Doctor raced around the console and searched for the fast return switch. It had to be somewhere. It wasn't under the old Batman comic he'd been reading. It wasn't hidden under the teacups. It wasn't, and he checked this twice, on the underside of the console. Eventually he saw it, sitting impossibly right next to the dematerialization circuit. Typical. The Doctor shook his head. He pressed it, and the TARDIS console room was bathed in darkness as, from deep within the craft, a spoing sound was heard. "How odd," the Doctor muttered, and throwing caution to the wind, he pressed the button again. This time there was a burble and a hiccup. Never one to view failure as anything other than a chance to have a second attempt at something, he pressed it again. This time the lights came back on and the TARDIS resumed its course. "Never give up," he grinned. When the TARDIS landed, instead of the usual trumpeting fanfare, it was a chorus of spoings, burps, burbles, and something that sounded suspiciously like a mallard trying to swallow a sofa. Given the option of repairs or rushing off to another adventure and hoping the TARDIS fixed itself in the meantime, the Doctor bolted for the door. He wrenched it open, and with his biggest grin said, "Did I also mention it travels in time?" To a pair of startled penguins. "This isn't London," he said with a peevish look over his shoulder at the console. "Oh well, would you ladies fancy a trip in a time machine?"
You have been listening to Extinction Day, a short story written by Daniel Worsley and read by Darran Jordan. This story was first published in our e-zine Trap Street, issue numbers 2 and 3. You can find out more about us at our website at www.drproductionsaus.org. You can also contact us at editors@drproductionsaus.org. Technical production and music was by Roger Reynolds. This has been a DR Productions project, and we hope that you have enjoyed the story and have been entertained.